360 podcast back for the first time in, I don't know, years. And we've got a new host here on Riverside, part of the Spotify network, and very excited to be back on the air. And we're going to be talking about prospects tonight. And with that, we're going to bring on our minor league maven, and that's David Groveman. David, so nice to be back on the air with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Brian. Thanks for having me on. Excited to talk about some of these prospects for 2025.
All right, well, let's get right into it. And we are going to talk about prospects, but first up tonight, I want to talk about the big league club. It was a disappointing loss this afternoon, but things are going very well. And one of the main reasons for that is the starting pitching. Most people had the starters as their biggest concern coming into the season, but the rotation is giving quality, if not quantity. David, are you surprised by what we've been seeing from the rotation? The second part of that question is, who do you think is the weak spot and may be in jeopardy of losing their place in the rotation once Sean Manaea and Frankie Montas return?
Well, in terms of surprise, I think I'm not as surprised as I might have been before spring training. I think spring training made me gain some faith in a couple of these pitchers. I do think that the Mets rotation is still an injury concern because of the pitchers that we have healthy. We have Kodai Sanga who could get hurt at any point, and that's something we need to be wary of. And if we're talking about who might be sent down when we get some of our injured pitchers back, I think you're really choosing between Griffin Canning and Tyler McGill, although with Canning it would be sent to the bullpen, I think, as opposed to the minors. And if it's me choosing and not the Mets, I would send McGill down to Triple A, not because I think he's the worst pitcher necessarily, but because the Mets have these injury concerns. I like having the demotion be someone who's going to be ready to step up and start again immediately. Whereas if you move Canning into a relief role, he's going to need to work himself up to innings again, sort of from scratch. So I that's the reason that I would do it that way more than anyone's particular success. I just don't think right now you could consider in any eventuality Sanga, Peterson, or Holmes being the odd man out.
And of course, we also have to consider options. And with McGill having an option, that makes him the easy choice to remove from the rotation if and when everyone is healthy. But let's transition going from the starters in the major league team to starters in the minor league organization. Now, it's very early in the minor league season, but it seems to me that the pitching has been just a bit disappointing. If we look back just to 1 year ago, we see fast starts from guys like Nolan McLean and Brandon Sproat and Jonah Tong, who all ended up with early promotions. Do you know of anyone or think of anyone who's on that type of pace so far here in 2025?
Well, I mean, certainly not Brandon Sproat or Jonah Tong, although Jonah Tong is pitching again tonight, and hopefully he does better. But I think McLean is pitching pretty darn well and could be in line for a promotion to AAA, where he will inevitably collapse, as all Met prospect pitchers seem to do. There's other names that you could see as being sort of fringe doing very well. Those names would be Jonathan Santucci down in Brooklyn, or our wild card pitcher Matt Allen, who is healthy again and pitching down in Port St. Lucie. Also, Nate Dome is pitching pretty well in Port St. Lucie. He had a nice game today.
Yeah, let's talk a second about Matt Allen, if we can. I mean, he's certainly someone that I had given up on and didn't think that he was ever going to be able to recover from all of the injuries that he's had. Yet here he is, and I believe he's made two starts, and while he hasn't gone but 2, 3 innings in both of those starts, he's pitched very well. What do you think about Matt Allen? Do you still hold out hope for him? Do you think we'll ever see him on the mound in Queens?
Well, I mean, I think that you're going to see the Mets sort of forced to be a little bit aggressive with their approach to him in 2025. The scouting is that he's throwing 97 miles an hour, which is a very good sign. We know he has multiple pitches, and he's getting success at that low level. I think that you have to see him start getting to 5 and 6 innings in an outing before you're going to see him promoted. But there's really no reason to hold him at Port St. Lucie based upon what he's doing so far, other than stretching him out. And once that happens, Brooklyn's a nice, friendly ballpark, and she'd see a promotion to there. I always kept him sort of in my radar section, even when I dropped him off of the top 50 just for injury reasons, because when it comes down to it, his overall ceiling remained higher than a lot of players that I would rank above him just because they have more recent relevant numbers.
It's certainly a great story, and I think that we're all pulling for him, and I honestly think it would be a minor miracle if he ever made it to the Mets, but you never know. That's why they play the games. All right. Well, let's move away from Allen, and I want to talk about a team rather than an individual player. And I guess coming into the season, most of us thought that Binghamton was set up to be the best farm team in the organization, but so far it's been Brooklyn with their 7-3 start. Who or what has stood out to you from the Cyclones here in the early going?
Well, I mean, there is a lot to love about Carson Bench, but if I talk about Bench, then I'm burying the lead on what's been going on in Brooklyn. And that's Chris Suero, who has been playing as if he wants to be the top prospect in all of baseball. He has five doubles and five home runs in 9 games. He had a total of 29 extra base hits in 112 games last year. So this is like categorically better than anyone could conceive of him doing. And we do expect him to drop off at some point, but he has been unbelievably good and really a center point to the offense consistently day in, day out. I will point out that during this time he's striking out much more than he has in previous years, but I think we're all going to accept a lower on base percentage if he's going to slug 901.
Now, you mentioned Carson Bench, and he's probably one of my favorite prospects in the organization. And he's hitting here in the early going, but I guess I kind of expected that given his pedigree and playing at a major college program and only being in high A. But to me, I guess the thing that I'm most encouraged about is he's playing center field. And I think there was certainly some big question marks about whether he'd be able to play center field at a higher level in the majors, which is what we're all ultimately interested in. Any thoughts about Benj and his ultimate defensive position?
I think his ultimate defensive position is probably in one of the corners. I think that if you look at the top three true outfield prospects that the Mets have, and even then, sort of a stretch to call Chet Williams an outfield prospect just yet, I think Benj's defensive ceiling is lower than either Gilbert or Williams. I would actually say that Williams is probably the person who might ultimately be the best center fielder out of the three of them. That being said, while he's in his younger years, I think there's no reason to think that Ben short term couldn't be a successful center fielder.
Obviously, the Mets are set up with Juan Soto in right field for the foreseeable future, and we hope that Brandon Nimmo is able to hold down left field for considerable time as well. And if Benj can make it in center field, or Williams for that matter, that certainly makes things good for the Mets. Well, moving away from Benj, I want to talk about another top draft choice of the Mets, and that's Colin Houck. He was the team's first pick in 2023, but here he is repeating low A here in 2025. However, he's only in his age 20 season, so that's pretty much right on target for where you want a prospect to be at low A. What are your thoughts on Hauk, and do you have any higher hopes for him now than maybe you did 2 months ago?
Well, I mean, he was bad in 2024. He was very, very bad. And he seemed like every single game that I would watch him, like a guarantee of at least two, if not three strikeouts per game. And that's not a good look on a first pick. Uh, but he is doing much, much better this year. He's still striking out about once a game. And he is playing on a team that has a boatload of middle infielders right now because low A, you're looking at Jeremy Rodriguez, Marco Vargas, Jeff McNeil right now, and AJ Ewing all on this same roster. And if I was going to sort of put my outlook on these players, excluding McNeil, not putting Hauk at the top of that. So that still doesn't speak well of a first pick, but he certainly has a lot more power potential than Vargas or Ewing. And, it's starting to come together. I still want him to strike out at this level a little bit less than once a game, and we'll see if he can do that.
Now, during the off season, you and I were discussing where he should rate or even if he should rate on a top 50 list. And I think my opinion was that he should have been in like the lower 40s. I don't recall what your response to that was, but the thing that jumps out to me is that I don't believe you posted a top 20 or a top 50 prospect list here in the off season. So who do you have ranked as the team's top 10 prospects right now?
So, as you know, I keep my list sort of constantly in flux as I see players going up and down. And I actually recently updated my list, at least in the top 10. I am currently listing Carson Bench as my number one prospect, seeing him as the guy of the highest ceiling with my highest feeling of likelihood to being an impact player at the major league level. I put Jet Williams number two. I still like Jet Williams a lot, but a little bit of my confidence has been shaken in him. I haven't seen as strong a start from him, especially considering he's back in Double A. Brandon Sproat, I have listed as number three, and that's a weak number three. I could see Brandon Sproat dipping down further. I believe before the season, having seen him in spring training a couple of times, I had him as my number one prospect, so he's been someone falling on my list. I list Ronnie Mauricio as my number four because when Ronnie Mauricio is back, I am hopeful that he will be an immediate impact player once he is fully healthy. Ryan Clifford coming in as number five. Jonah Tong, even with his bad first outing of the season, coming in as number six. Still a player that I'm very high on. Drew Gilbert has come up a couple of positions for me thanks to starting off pretty well in his rehab assignment. We'll see if he holds on to that as he goes back to AAA. Nolan McLean has gone up and he's currently ranking eighth overall. I then have Jesus Baez, who I think is probably our best true shortstop player because I see Jet Williams as more of an outfielder now. And then holding on by the absolute skin of his teeth to the 10th position, I have Blade Tidwell, who is fending off Daverson Gutierrez and Jeremy Rodriguez, who are vying for the top 10 right now.
I've been a Tidwell fan ever since they drafted him, and certainly it was disappointing the year that he turned in last year at Syracuse. And um, let's talk about Syracuse. It seems to be an environment that's not necessarily so friendly for our top pitching prospects. We've seen so many pitchers here recently have success in Double A, but then they get knocked around in Triple A, and you can put Dom Hamill and Justin Jarvis and Sproat and Wander Suarez, Tidwell and Mike Vassell, who's no longer in the organization. But all those guys had success in Double A and then struggled in Syracuse. Do you feel like this is just a normal adjustment to a tougher level, or do you think there's something odd going on here?
Well, I think at the major league level, the Mets pitching lab gets a ton of credit for the success that pitchers have there. I know that Mike Vassell and potentially even Dom Hamill both were tinkering with things last year, and I'm wondering if the pitching lab may be trying to futz with prospect pitchers at the AAA level and it's seeing them struggle. But the fact of the matter is, Syracuse in early spring is pretty bleak and dismal and has lingering winter weather. It's not much farther north than Binghamton, and Binghamton is pretty much the same sort of climate, but it is a higher level of hitter. So for whatever that reason, we're seeing the pitchers really struggle there. And the thing that we're seeing more than anything is control problems. Now, Tidwell and Sproat both are pitchers who are going to walk players, but I think that if they're going to be successful, they need to have their strikeouts per nine innings at around nine or higher, and they can't be striking out, can't be walking more than about three per nine innings if they're going to be successes in the long run. They will walk batters, but they can't be as free with the bases as they have been.
Now, it seems to me that you mentioned the colder climate in Syracuse, but you would think that would be advantageous to the pitchers, assuming that they can throw strikes. And it seems like we have the 1-2 combination of too many walks and too many homers allowed from these pitchers when they get to Syracuse. And it's that old saying, anything can happen once, twice could be a coincidence, but if you see it three times, maybe you have a trend. And I think that we're at least seeing the early signs of it happening 3 years in a row now, and I'm worried about it.
And I think there is reason for concern. I mean, I still remember when our AAA ball club was in Las Vegas, and more or less we couldn't trust any of the offensive or pitching numbers that came out of there because you were basically having an infield made of blacktop. So runs were scoring for every reason. So it's tough to say that Syracuse is affecting pitchers negatively, but I think where it is affecting pitchers negatively is in control. And I don't know why that is particularly. We did see at the major league levels, we saw some control issues for Clay Holmes in his start, not the most recent one, but the one before that. And some of that could have been attributed to cold that he was dealing with, that he couldn't really get his sinking pitches to do what he wanted them to do. And it's possible that we're seeing that from Sproat and Tidwell, but I'm not at those games to see exactly where those pitches are missing.
So I mentioned Vassell, and of course the Mets lost him in the Rule 5 draft this past off season, and I see where he's gotten into the games with the White Sox. So we wish him well, and there's probably no place with more opportunity than the Chicago White Sox for either a pitcher or a hitter.
You are
Anyway,
correct.
so let's switch over from talking about pitching and let's talk about center field. Obviously Jose Siri came down with what very well could be a season-ending injury, and it's not like he was doing great before the injury either. Center field is a big question mark for the Mets, both in the immediate and the long-term future. So, assuming that they don't import someone to take the job, whether that's through a trade or through a free agent signing, who do you think starts in center field for the Mets in 2026? And do you view that person as a long-term answer, or will there be somebody else starting in center field in, say, 2028?
Well, I think you have a number of different answers here because I think that, 2025, you're going to have a lot of Taylor, but the Mets are toying with McNeil getting time in center field. And certainly once Drew Gilbert is back in AAA, if he's able to continue the numbers he's been having, is an excellent platoon mate to send up to go into center field with him. I think that you're going to really see a competition forming between Drew Gilbert, Jet Williams, and Carson Benj for who is going to latch on to that spot. And I mean, in terms of offensive ceiling, Benj has it on that. I think he is going to be your most complete hitter of the three. I just don't know if he is as natural a candidate for center field as we talked about before. Gilbert is probably your highest floor player though, and for short-term solutions, especially if you want these prospects to develop a little longer, I think 2026 you're looking at Gilbert potentially being that guy just because he's safe and gives you more time to develop a Jet Williams or a Carson Bench.
Now, it's interesting. I know some people have been calling for Gilbert to get called up here in the wake of Siri's injury. He's still recovering from his own injury from last year. He's currently in A ball, low A or high A. I can't remember off the top of my head. But anyway,
I
the
believe he's still in low A, but I didn't see him in today's lineup, so it's possible that he's on the move.
nice. But as far as right now here in 2025, it seems like he's a real long shot because he's not on the 40-man roster. So I guess I still see Gilbert as more of a fourth outfielder type than necessarily a starter. My hope is that Williams is does well enough this year that he forces his way into the picture in 2026, but that may just be wishful thinking on my part.
I mean, I want every single prospect to reach their full potential. I think that especially with the sense that you're going to have Taylor there in 2025, I think that Gilbert getting a timeshare role in center field this year as a tryout is probably likely. And it's really going to come down to Jet Williams hitting as much as we thought he would now that he's in Double A and healthy.
Very good. All right. Well, we've reached the crazy projection part of the show. I'm going to give you something potentially weird, potentially oddball, and then ask you to comment on it. Then I want you to give me your off the beaten path idea, and I'll give you my 2 cents. Okay. Are you ready?
Sure.
My prediction is that Jet Williams plays a game in center field for the Mets before Luis Angel Acuna, even though Acuna is in the majors and Williams is in LA. So tell me, how crazy is that?
All right. Well, I don't think it's necessarily completely insane. I do think that it is unlikely, only because right now, you don't have another player on the team who can play any center field, really. I think that the Mets, if Taylor gets hit with a pitch or something, Acuna is probably the guy that just gets thrown in there because he can probably play the position well enough. So it seems unlikely, but I won't go you sending you to any sort of asylum.
Well, I try to think of something crazy and I feel like I failed. All right, hit me with your craziness.
All right. Well, so I still remember fondly the days when the Mets had just a absolute murderer's row of aces in their rotation, where you'd have Matt Harvey, Jacob deGrom, Zach Wheeler, and Noah Syndergaard, and it was developing these really high end pitchers. And I'm looking at those years and comparing them to last year and this year, where we don't really have anyone who I would consider a superstar by any stretch. And for whatever reason, I feel like the Mets might be better with this approach of simply going for pitchers who keep you in games. Do you think it's better to just have sort of a consistent middling rotation, or do you think teams need to be built around these star pitchers still?
Well, I don't think that you necessarily need to have a guy. Let's use Zach Wheeler as someone who's a bona fide ace. Sure, it's nice to have that, but David Stearns has showed us that you get guys with quality arms and put them in a position to succeed and things can work out well. Now, of course, that all fell apart in the NLCS last year, so we have to see it succeed at the very highest levels. But certainly during the regular season, I think that not only can work, but it does work. To me, the big question is, can it work in a 7 game series against a team as good as the Dodgers or whoever the top team in the American League may be?
Yeah, well, and the Dodgers' starting rotation might be one of those on paper that could rival those Matt Harvey, Jacob deGrom, Zach Wheeler, Noah Syndergaard days.
If they can keep him healthy and if Sasaki can go more than 3 innings at a time.
True.
All right, well, I don't think either one of us hit a crazy in that, so we'll have to do better next time.
Yeah.
I want to switch over to a guy that you brought up earlier here in the show, and that's Ronnie Mauricio. And, we've all been a little disappointed, a little antsy waiting for him to show up somewhere. And we've heard rumors or reports that he's taking swings in the extended spring training. So that's good news, but it's still not quite where we want him to be. And I want to know, what do you see as his likely development this year? Do you even think he gets 100 plate appearances in the majors?
Well, I think that once Mauricio is truly healthy, it's a matter of getting him, up to speed with live pitching again more than anything else. He really showed in his last healthy season with the Mets, and then the winter season that followed, where he was ultimately injured, that he was a prospect on the rise with a lot of impact potential. He had gotten away from being, a pure and had been getting hits and hits with authority and walking more. He really had become sort of a well-rounded hitter. If I was expecting him already to sort of be in a minor league lineup. So I don't know when it's going to happen. And you're correct. 100 plate appearances in the majors may be beyond his reach this year because he keeps getting his season shortened. Every day he doesn't appear in a minor league game is just that much longer we're going to have to wait for him to be ready for the majors. But I think once he is healthy, I don't think that Winker, Marte, or McNeil are safe players in the major league lineup. If the Mets are looking for some offensive infusion late in the season, I think that's what Mauricio we're hoping he's there for. You could even look at Brandon Nimmo and Mark Vientos, who are not off to strong starts as risks for losing some playing time.
No one doubts that Mauricio has lightning in his bat. The biggest question is if he's going to hit enough. Is he going to make enough contact with the ball to be able to take advantage of the elite bat speed that he has? And where do you stand on that? Do you see him developing into a full-time starter who maybe the all-star team is a bit much, but a consistent starter in the major leagues given his issues with making contact?
Well, I will admit that at certain points in his development, I did not see a true major league future for him. I saw Mauricio as really having way too much strikeout in his profile for all his other peripheral tools. But I think in where we saw him in his last minor league season and his a taste of the majors, I really saw a different sort of player developing. And in a much more extended and realistic time frame than the glimpse we got of Luis Angel Acuna in the end of last season and Winter League.
Well, we have time for one more question, and I want to circle back to someone you talked about earlier, and that's Chris Suero. And to me, Suero, because of his ability to play positions besides catcher, kind of thought that he might be on the move given all of the depth of catching in the Mets minor league system. It's an impressive depth that they have from top to bottom. Do you think Suero or possibly someone else in the low minors might ultimately force a trade or a position switch for Francisco?
Well, I personally remain an adamant believer that we haven't seen the best from Francisco Alvarez that we will eventually see. That being said, there is a ton of talent at the catching position for the Mets. I think I wrote at least one full article about it last year where it's just sort of an uncanny amount of depth at a very skilled position. In terms of the high ceiling players, the ones that I would look as the most likely to unseat Alvarez at catcher, you're looking at Diverson Gutierrez and Giovanni Rodriguez. I think those are the players that have sort of the high end tools to be front end starting catchers. And on paper before this season, before this absolutely insane start, I don't think you would look at Chris Suero or Ronald Hernandez as more than guys who would slot into those secondary roles, replacing Luis Torrens in the future. Maybe we're all wrong, and Chris Suero's start to this season is uh, absolutely true, and we're going to have a 40 to 50 home run player who can catch, and that would be a great thing to have.
With uh, carrying only four reserves, there's always that concern about, well, what happens if you pinch hit for your catcher and your backup catcher gets injured? And it's always going to be something nice if you have somebody who's caught before on your roster. And if a Suero or a Hernandez don't make it as a full-time catcher or even a backup catcher, if they're able to hit enough to be on a reserve, it'd be a very nice thing to have their catching background as part of their total package of what they offer the club.
Absolutely. And I think both of those players, although I will say Hernandez is supposed to be really good defensively at catcher as well. So I don't know that the Mets are as likely to play with him switching out of that catching role as much as they might with Suero. We'll see, because he has played other positions. He has been at first base and played a little bit of time elsewhere in the field. But I have read stuff that Ronald Hernandez is supposed to be pretty good with the glove.
Very good stuff, David. Thank you very much for joining us. We're going to make this a somewhat regular feature, a podcast. David will be joining us, as will other writers from the site, and who knows, maybe we'll even extend our reach and go outside of the Mets 360 family to bring in a guest here for the podcast. But thank you all to everyone who tuned in to listen to our discussion, and let us know if there's anything you'd like to hear us discuss in the future. All right, everyone, have a great night.